Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. In a moment, we're going to continue hearing evidence from Claire Williams of the Tenant Management Organisation. But before we do that, there's something Mr. Millett needs to deal with. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Yes, there is, I'm afraid. At 16:40 p.m. on Friday afternoon last week, the inquiry received a letter from Kennedy's, the solicitors for the TMO, that they had been informed by Peter Madison that morning, and I quote, "Having watched the evidence of his former colleagues at the inquiry, and in particular the questions asked of them as to whether minutes or notes of the meeting with Ryden on the 18th of March 2014 had been made, he decided to check his notebooks to see whether he had made notes of that particular meeting. This was the first time that Kennedy's were made aware that Peter Madison had hard copy notebooks in his possession at his house." Close quotes. At our immediate request, Kennedy's scanned the contents of the notebooks to us and did so over the weekend, and they delivered the hard copies to us here at the inquiry this morning at about 8 a.m. Mr. Chairman, Madam Estefan, here they are. You can see from this pile that there are in fact 8 daybooks and 5 diaries spanning the years from the 23rd of January 2013 to the 10th of May 2017. They run to some 300 pages or so of often dense manuscript notes. They cover all of Mr. Madison's work while he was at the TMO during that period, and they are not only about Grenfell Tower, but they certainly include material about Grenfell Tower. Now, thanks to the strenuous efforts of my team over the weekend, and in particular Andrew Kinnear QC, Adam Gadd and Emma Hines of Junior Counsel, and Victoria O'Brien and Erica Berkey of Inquiry Solicitors, they have been read. They plainly contain material of the utmost relevance. Subject to a speedy redaction process that will start immediately, they will be disclosed to core participants as soon as possible, I am hoping during the day today. Now, 2 things follow from that, both of which are obvious. First, both Kennedys and Mr. Madison are going to have to give clear and convincing explanations of why these documents were not disclosed to the inquiry, and nor, so far as we can tell, to the Metropolitan Police until now. I will wish to examine Mr. Madison on that subject at the start of his scheduled evidence on Tuesday morning. I reserve my position on the examination of the supervising partner or partners at Kennedy's. The present partner is continuing to investigate the position and is yet to respond meaningfully. The second thing that follows is the substance of Mr. Madison's evidence, and we would suggest that that should not proceed immediately after being sworn in tomorrow as scheduled. Core participants should be given a fair opportunity to read and digest the contents of the notebooks and the diaries, and suggest further questions to be asked of him by me. It is unwise, on the other hand, to let matters drift beyond a day or two, or at least what is absolutely necessary for the core participants to have a fair opportunity to do what I've suggested. And I'm going to suggest that we would rise on Tuesday after Mr. Madison is sworn and examined on the disclosure question, and then resume on Wednesday, possibly at 2 p.m. on that day, and hear his evidence through Wednesday, Thursday, and into Monday of next week, the 26th of October. That would give core participants some 48 hours, we hope, with the notes before he starts giving his evidence, perhaps a little bit less than that, but as much time as they can fairly be given by us. And we will, of course, be amenable to questions on those diaries right through the time he's giving evidence, over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, including Monday morning itself. We want to bend over backwards to make sure that they really do get to the bottom of this critical material, as well as us. It is also right to say that he's coming back at Module 3 in any event, in March, I think, to give evidence, and we can sweep up any remaining Module 1 questions that do remain outstanding with him then. as indeed we may with other TMO witnesses who are also returning where further questions suggest themselves from this material. If there's significant objection to that course from core participants, then we will obviously reconsider. Well, I would invite you to reconsider. But what I'm proposing presents the best opportunity to get to his evidence while the TMO evidence of other witnesses is still fresh in your minds and in their minds and in the core participants' minds, and not to lose very much by way of timetable hearing time. That leads me, Mr. Chairman, to a second and unrelated problem. We were told yesterday morning by Paul Hyatt, the inquiry's architectural expert, that a member of his household tested positive for COVID-19 last week, and that as a result, he now has to self-isolate until Thursday, the 29th of October. We are therefore currently investigating whether we can adjust the timetable so as to hear the evidence of Beryl Menzies, the expert on building control, on Tuesday, the 27th of October, and the evidence from Dr. Lane on Wednesday and Thursday, the 28th and 29th of October, respectively. And then take Mr. Hyatt on Monday and Tuesday, the 2nd and 3rd of November, and put openings for Module 2 off until Wednesday, the 4th and Thursday, the 5th of November. If we can reschedule in that way, we will lose no time at all. We will continue to pursue this closely and keep core participants fully informed as we do so. It's obviously of the first importance that any amendments to the timetable and any concomitant effect on the timetabling of the witnesses is kept to a minimum. Finally, let me add one final thing, and I just want to mention it. Yesterday morning at 11:41, we received an email from Kennedy's, which had attached to it a 2-page Word document for disclosure, which was plainly relevant to Claire Williams' evidence on the issue of residents' involvement in the tender scoring. And that is an issue that we covered on Thursday. We are at present mystified as to how this document was missed by the TMO in its disclosure and where it came from. We've asked Kennedy's, but so far the answers have been, with great respect to them, unsatisfactory. We will have to find out from Miss Williams, but I will need to make sure that that document gets disclosed as soon as possible, again, as an absolute priority. Mr. Chairman, that is what I wanted to say. That will obviously cause some degree of dismay among those watching this process. But I don't think it's necessary to hold up Miss Williams' evidence. We can continue with that, certainly for today. And if there are further questions that arise from the single 2-page document that I've referred to, then they can be taken perhaps later today or tomorrow morning if need be.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Mr. Millett. It is very unsatisfactory that what appears to be quite a substantial stack of notebooks should have
Yes.
been disclosed to us only very much at the last minute.
Yes.
And it's essential that not only our own inquiry team, but also core participants should have an adequate opportunity to examine them and see to what extent they may be thought to be relevant and helpful. So we are going to have to make adjustments to the timetable for that purpose.
Yes.
And there it is. As far as Mr. Hyatt's concerned, it's unfortunate, of course, that he's now had to go into isolation. That will itself inevitably mean some changes to the timetable.
Yes.
From what you've said this morning, I think that the proposals you've made sound sensible, but obviously we'll want to take note of anything that any of the core participants want to say about it.
Yes.
And we'll just take it from there. But I agree, there's no reason why we should hold up taking the rest of Miss Williams' evidence. And would be a good thing to get on and do that now.
Yes. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful. Thank you.
Right,
We'll get on and do that and see how things evolve during the course of the day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Yes, would you ask Miss Williams to come back in, please?
I'll give them to you in a second.
Good morning, Miss Williams.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, you ready to carry on?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Ms. Williams, good morning. Before I start, can I ask you, please, to confirm that your witness statements represent a full and truthful and correct statement of your evidence from which nothing material has been left out?
I would hope so. But if I missed anything out, it was by error,
Right.
not by design.
Do you know what these are?
Diaries?
Yes. They are the diaries of and notebooks, or daybooks, of Peter Madison. We have a lot of them, and they span the period from January 2013 to May 2017. Have you ever seen these or anything like them before?
I would have, everybody, if it was a work situation, everybody would have a notebook of some sort.
Would they? And did you ever see Mr. Madison writing things in his notebook or in his diary while you
Yes.
were working with him?
Yes.
Would you see him writing or recording things in books that look like this or like this?
The bigger one, probably, yes.
Right. Do you know where he kept them?
In his desk? I don't know, I'm speculating, but we all had a notebook that we would use, so
I
I
see.
don't know where he kept his.
Can you confirm for us that you have handed over all your notebooks, diaries and records that you kept, like the ones I'm holding in my hand from Peter Madison, to your solicitors, to Kennedy's?
Yes, I left the TMO in May 18, and I binned all of them but the last one, and Kennedy's have possession of the last one, which covered probably 17, 18.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Going to hand those back to junior counsel.
So can I just, are you going to follow that up?
Well, I might. Yes.
Well,
Well,
I'm going to ask a question now.
Please do.
Just remind me again, you left the TMO in
May 18,
May 18, so that's
Yes.
nearly a year after the fire.
yes.
And at that time, did you still have the various notebooks that you'd kept during the period since you joined?
I probably would have, because I joined in 13, I probably would have thrown the earlier one or two, but I may have had 2 or 3 that were there, yes.
Right. And then you said you binned them, is that right?
I didn't keep them.
Well, what did you do with them?
I think if the police didn't take them, I binned them.
You binned them, even though you knew by that time that there was going to be, or was already on foot, a public inquiry.
I believe I looked at them and they were notes. Everything that was in there, I would have thought is actually documented elsewhere.
So
For example, notes of site meeting minutes. We would have formal site meeting minutes.
I find it difficult to understand why you should have thought that, first of all, the notes you'd kept might not add something of value to the formal records, and secondly, why you should think it right to take it upon yourself to decide that question.
Yeah, no, as I'm sitting here now, I agree with you, but the police may have taken them, but I know there was none left in the office when I left.
With respect, if you actually took steps to destroy them, which is what I assume you mean by binning them,
Yeah.
you would know that you'd done that, wouldn't you?
Yes, I cleared my desk.
Yes. So do you remember destroying any of your notes?
I don't. I think I just tidied out the desk. I would have looked at them and thought, there is nothing here that isn't informal evidence. And so I got rid of them. But I did
Right.
keep the last one I had, which is the one that I've given to Kennedy's.
And by that time, because we're now looking at May 2018, had no one asked you to retain any documents in your possession that might have any bearing on what you've been doing during the previous 5 years?
I don't think so. But I say that the police also took away most of my desk at the time, but I don't know whether they were in a drawer. They weren't hidden. I don't lock my drawers. But nobody asked for them, apart from, say, I did keep the last one because that was the one that I thought was most
Yeah,
relevant.
but no, what I was really getting at, no, as far as you can recall, no one asked you in general terms to ensure that no documents were destroyed.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Yes, thank you.
Do you remember whether you destroyed those notebooks before or after the police emptied your desk, as you put it?
I don't remember. I wasn't there when the police came to take all the paperwork away, but all I know is when I left, I just left with the one notebook.
And are you quite sure that at the time you destroyed those notebooks, just to follow up on the chairman's question, you had had no advice from anybody that you had to retain all of your records relating to the Grenfell Tower project?
I don't remember that at all. And I say there would have been several options where it may have come up, but I do not remember that.
Do you remember whether you told Kennedys, who had responsibility for the TMO's disclosure, that there were notebooks which you had destroyed?
I think it only came up when I said, well, I have a book that may help. That was probably the only point that it came up.
When was that, please?
Oh, I don't remember. It was possibly last year.
Can you explain why there's nothing in any of your witness statements about your record keeping, and in particular your decision to destroy records relating to the project that you had in your possession?
That there was nothing underhand about it. I was clearing my desk. I looked and decided that everything that was in there was the way it was noted. It was then formally represented in minutes or in other paperwork, and it was of little value. So I appreciate that perhaps indication should have been given to preserve everything, but it was for me, I just left the job and I cleared my desk.
At the time you made your decision to destroy these documents, did you know that a public inquiry and a police investigation were on foot?
I would have known that, yes. And that's I don't know, the police would have had options to open the drawers, so they could have taken what was there at the time. I don't know why they weren't perhaps retrieved at that point.
Have you ever informed the Metropolitan Police that you had destroyed documents which were relevant to their investigation?
No, I didn't.
Why is that?
Because it's not occurred to me. Today is the first time that I've ever really had a conversation about this.
I'm assuming that, and I don't want to get into the evidence or communications, but I'm assuming that you didn't tell anybody else either.
I possibly would have said to Kennedy's, I only have one book, which I have at home, and they said, bring it in, why is it at
Well, I
home?
don't want to know about legal advice.
Yes, okay.
That remains privileged until the TMO choose, and they may, to waive it about the communications between you and them on this subject. So when I asked you at the very beginning of your evidence whether your witness statements were a full and candid account, that's not the case, is it, in respect of the destroyed notebooks?
I'd say that they weren't destroyed. I didn't rip pages out of them. And
You've been-
also they covered other projects. So I cleared my desk. So it wasn't a conscious, I'm hiding anything decision. It was, I'm clearing my desk.
Well, they were destroyed. You binned them.
I put them in the bin.
Yes. So when I asked you at the beginning of your evidence whether your witness statements were a full and candid account, that is not the case in respect of the binned records, notebooks, is it?
Yeah, no, it didn't occur to me. It's not been an issue that's been raised.
Right. Well, let's go back to the substance of the evidence. Can we go to the question of Ryden's price against other bids, please? And I want to go, please, first to ART 402197 at page 12. Now, this is a table within Artelia's final tender report dated the 12th of March 2014, Ms. Williams, which I think you're familiar with. And this sets out the prices returned by the bidders as at that date. And at the top of the page, we can see the column headers. Do you see descriptions, Artelia's pre-tender estimate, Ryden, Durkan, Mullally, and then the average? Do you see?
Yes.
And then if we scroll to the bottom row, we can see the adjusted tender sums. Artelia's pre-tender estimate is just over £10 million. And then Ryden comes in at 9.249 odd million, with Durkan at 9.94 odd million, and Mullally at 10.48 odd million pounds, with the average at 9.8. So you could see from that at a glance that Ryden's figure was some £700,000 odd lower than the next lowest bid, Durkan's. Yes?
Yes.
and about £600,000 lower than the average. Did you think at the time that Ryden's price was really quite a lot lower than the other bidders?
I would have expected Atelier, who had interrogated the figures, to comment if there were any omissions or if there was any areas that were underpriced. If they didn't comment, because they had obviously a clear overview of what the figures contained, I would have expected them to say something. I wasn't familiar enough with the figures to comment.
Right. Were you concerned that just looking at that page, Ryden's price was unrealistically low?
Again, I wouldn't know what they put in against each element, so it wasn't part of my understanding whether it was high or low.
Did it not strike you as significantly lower than Artelia's pre-tender estimate, Durkan's and Mullally's indicated tender bids?
If you look at it at face value, yes, but as I say, I didn't have the detailed understanding of where the costs were to know whether it was realistic or not.
Well, forgive me, but all that information appears on the page immediately above adjusted tender sum. That's the build-up. What was missing that disabled you from making having a detailed understanding or making an analysis?
For example, I would look at external facade, where you can see there is clearly a million difference between the Atelier view. But if you look across the board, there's about 400,000 difference between the high and the low. So there are lots of figures like that that would need interrogation, and I'm looking at it at face value.
Right. Did you ever think that Ryden's price might mean that Ryden would not deliver quality or would cut corners?
No.
That it was a lowball figure just designed to win the deal?
Possibly.
That did occur to you?
When you get figures of a range like that, they aren't that far apart. But I would say that contractors who put in their prices are gearing it to what the market can bear and what their workload is.
But I think you accept as a possibility that it had occurred to you that it was a lowball figure designed just to win the deal, win the contract.
No, it was a figure they'd considered. An Atelier had checked it, and therefore I had to take at face value based on their report.
Well, your first answer, Miss Williams, that was to my question, it was a lowball figure just to design to win the deal, was possibly. Is that wrong or is that right?
Possibly it could have been done to win the deal. Yes, yeah. Possibly they could have read all the paperwork.
Let's turn to a different topic, decision about cladding. When you started at the TMO in September 2013, the prospect of using aluminium composite material, or ACM, for cladding, I think had already been raised. Do you remember that?
I think that the previous incumbents in post had looked at it, yes.
Is it fair to say that you don't know who suggested ACM before your time?
Yeah, no, as you say, it was minuted before my time.
And is it fair also to say that you therefore don't know what investigation was done before your time in relation to ACM as an alternative to zinc?
True.
Is it also right to say that at least by March 2014, when the tender was won, the only cladding material being considered was ACM?
No, at the tender time, we'd asked for alternative proposals. So and we obviously hadn't had planning approval at that point. So there was no firm decision made. It was still options.
Let me put the question a bit more specifically. Do you agree that after the 18th of March, once Ryden had been notified that they were the winning bidder, the only cladding being considered was ACM? There was no further consideration of a zinc cladding with a metal honeycomb core?
I believe I went to meet the planners in the May. So from the March, I think ACM was being put forward. The architect was still quite keen on the zinc finish, but it hadn't been finalised because we hadn't had the planner's view. They may have had reasons for rebutting that option. So I believe it was still an option rather than a decision.
Yes, I'd like you to draw the distinction in your mind between zinc as the material, and he's an aluminium material with a zinc finish. It's right, isn't it, that the only option put to the planners was an aluminium composite material, and there were questions about what kind of finish it should have.
Yes.
Yes.
But I say, yeah.
Yes. Can we then look at your February 2019 statement, TMO 0084034, please, at page 15. I want to look at paragraph 81 with you, please. And I'd like to look at the very last sentence, 4 lines up from the bottom of the page. And you say there, and my understanding was that there was no difference between the types of cladding in terms of specification, etc., and the only difference was in relation to appearance to suit the RBKC preferences. I had no input to these decisions. Now, was your understanding, as you stated it there, reached on the basis of any discussion that you had had with anybody on the project?
The cladding discussions seem to be continuous in terms of the finish, the fixing. So I would say that there was a lot of discussion about what the look should be and how it would be, what the preference was of the planners. Sorry, I've probably lost the thread of your question a little bit.
Well, let me ask it again then. Was the understanding that you had, that you described there, namely no difference between the types of cladding in terms of specification, was that reached on the basis of any discussion that you'd had with anybody on the project?
As we were talking about the cladding, there was always talk about it being Class O, and nobody said that this is an inferior quality, this is a better quality. It was all about the colour, the finish, whether it was smooth, whether it was textured, that sort of issue. So there was nothing in our conversations at all to say that one product was inferior or different, better quality than another.
When you say there was always talk about it being Class O,
Yes.
in fact it's Class 0, but let's not worry about that. When you say there was always talk about it, when did that talk start, to the best of your recollection?
I believe when Bruce Souness, the architect, introduced any colour palettes or any information, he would generally give us either hard copies of trade information or otherwise refer us to online websites. And again, that would be the information that we would always refer to.
Right. Can you give me a date when he first mentioned Class 0 to you?
I would
Even
suggest it was before the meeting with the planners, so I'd suggest it was before the May.
Right. Did he give you a certificate or, as you would call it, trade information which showed that it was a Class 0 fire classification?
I believe he would have had it at a meeting. I don't think he gave it a copy to everybody. I believe he had it available in his hand. But as I say, I don't remember taking away a copy.
Right. You say there was always talk about Class 0 or Class O. Was there ever talk about other kinds of performance characteristics, such as ingress of water or wind loading? Or was it only ever Class 0?
In my recollection, it was only ever Class 0.
So, just say we got your evidence crystal clear, Ms. Williams, are you saying that the discussions about performance or specification, to use your words at paragraph 81, were only ever about fire?
Yes. In my recollection, I don't remember anything else other than Class O being the specification that was presented with the samples or with any of the options we looked at.
Did Mr. Soanes tell you what Class O meant?
I don't remember.
Did you have any understanding about what Class O meant?
I believe Class O is about flame spread because I dealt with it previously in paint finishes to communal areas. So I presumed it was about flame spread.
I see. Just to dig a little further there, you say you dealt with it in relation to paint finishes to communal areas. Did you know or have any understanding that Class 0 was the required surface spread of flame classification for the exterior of a wall construction on a building above 18 metres?
Because it was referred to in terms of the cladding, I made that assumption.
Did you ever see any regulatory documents, building regulations, the schedule to the regulations, B4, or approved document B?
No.
Did you ever have a chance to look at those regulations or guidance during your role as project manager on this project?
No, I didn't.
Did you see the BBA certificate from January 2008 relating to the Reynebon PE55 ACM panels?
I don't remember. It may have been given to me at the end for the health and safety file, but I don't remember seeing it earlier.
You see, you said earlier on that Bruce Soanes would give you trade documents. Was one of them the BBA certificate for Reynebon PE55 ACM?
He had them available. He didn't. He offered them around the table potentially. He would have had them, in a pack by himself and said, "This is it," and you can look at it. I don't remember seeing that.
Did you take the opportunity yourself to have a look at what he was saying?
No.
Given that fire safety was the only functional aspect of the specification, why didn't you take the opportunity just to check for yourself why it was said that these panels were Class 0, given that you had some experience of Class 0 before?
It wasn't my role within the project to check the architect, and I know that he'd been doing research and he'd looked at several products and he had an understanding of what he was looking for.
In your statement at the bottom of paragraph 81, you say, "I had no input to these decisions." When you say that, do you mean that you didn't provide any input as a matter of fact, or that it wasn't your role to provide input?
It wasn't my role, because ultimately the planners were going to be choosing what colour finish they wanted.
Can I take you to the NBS specification then? This is SEA 50169. SEA 50169. Now, this is the NBS specification final revision dated the 30th of January 2014. It's the same, or pretty much the same for the present purposes, as the version sent out to tenderers at the end of November 2013. Does it, just from its first page, does it look familiar to you?
I would have seen it at the time.
You would have seen it at the time. By at the time, what do you mean?
At tender.
Right. So during November 2013, when it went out to the tenderers?
It was available online, yes.
Yes. When you say you saw it, did you read it?
I would have looked through to see what the headings were. I wouldn't have looked at specific items because it wouldn't have meant much to me. So I would have just looked at the headings as to what was there, what they'd specified
Right.
in terms of components, perhaps. But they'd looked at doors, walls, etc.
I see. You say it wouldn't have meant much to you. So does that mean you were relying on Studio E, for example, to explain things to you, if there was anything important that needed to be brought out?
Yes, obviously I was relying on our professional consultants.
Yeah. Did you discuss it specifically with Studio E when it was being compiled in the November of 2013?
I think it was being compiled before the November 13, because bear in mind it had been out to a tendering process with Leadbitter previously. I believe that a lot of it was already in place, but what they had done when the scheme restarted was they revisited areas. So I would have looked at it just to see what was in it, but I wouldn't have particularly discussed it with them unless there was a glaring omission that I would notice.
Right. Let's see if I can just trace this through a little bit. You joined the TMO on the 9th of September 2013, and the NBS specification went out to tenderers after having had an amendment to it I think on the 28th or 29th of November 2013. During those 2.5 months leading up to the document going out in its final form, did you have discussions with Studio E, who were compiling it, about what it should contain?
No.
No. So did you see the document essentially in its final form, or very advanced final form?
I saw it online before it went to tender, yes.
Right. And why were you looking at it online before it went to tenderers?
It was a ginormous document. It was massive. And there were drawings as well, so it wasn't something that I would print off. It was just too big.
No, I'm sorry, you misunderstood my question, and I'm not surprised. I wasn't asking you why you looked at it online as opposed to in paper form. My question really is, why were you looking at it at all at that stage?
I was the new girl on the system. People may have been more familiar with it than me, but to me it's my way of familiarising myself with what the project entailed.
Right. So do I take it from that you had no input at all, either by way of instruction or by way of advice from Studio E, about what it should contain or did contain?
I did not advise or instruct them as to what it should contain.
And did they give you any advice about what it did contain?
No.
Right. Did you ever look at the employer's requirements during the project?
Yes.
You did. Was there anything that you didn't understand about those?
There may have been the one or two issues that cropped up during the course of the project where I would need to refer to them. But again, if I didn't understand, I had my professional consultants there who I would ask.
Right. You say that the NBS specification didn't mean much to you. Did it not mean much to you even after you'd read it?
As I say, I looked for the headings to see that everything I would expect to be there was in there. But I wouldn't have looked at the BS numbers or anything of that sort because, again, it's specialist area and it's not my specialist area.
I see. Did you look at the specification for the cladding or the insulation or the cavity barriers, for example?
No.
You didn't?
No.
Was there anything when you looked at it that puzzled you, that you didn't understand?
I wasn't really looking to look at the detail. I was, as I say, just looking at headings to make sure there was something in there for every area that I understood was going to be worked on. So whether it be, I would have looked at the M&E specification, for example, and thought, oh, it's got boiler works there. I wouldn't have looked any more detailed than that.
When the TMO became principal designer in October 2015, after the change in the regulations, or rather the new regulations came into force in that month, did you go back and refresh your memory about what the NBS specification contained so that you could properly perform your role as a principal designer?
No, because at that point, the project should have completed because the original completion date was the September 15. The design work was all done. The role of the PD was to look at design and ensuring you eliminate risks, because at the stage we were at, the design was done. It was just Ryden were delayed in their programme. So that was one of the reasons that the TMO felt capable of taking on the PD role, that there wasn't any design ongoing that would have meant that we had to look at that area, which wasn't, again, our expertise potentially. So we were just at the point of putting together, compiling the health and safety file, which is why I think we got it minuted.
We're going to come back to that in due course, but just, I think the answer to my question is no, you didn't look at the NBS specification.
No, at that stage the design was done.
Thank you. Can we then look at your 2019 statement, your February 2019 statement at page 37? We were on that just a moment ago, and I want to go to paragraph 33 now, a little bit earlier on in the statement. Paragraph 33, page 7 of your February 2019 statement says, the construction detail was interrogated by RBKC planners and Building Control, who liaised with the principal contractor, their advisors, and London Fire Brigade, LFB, to ensure all building and fire safety requirements would be met. When you say the construction detail was interrogated by RBKC planners, what do you mean by construction detail there?
The detailed drawings would have been lodged with the borough as part of the building control application.
Yeah, but by construction detail, what are you telling us? What detail is it that you think was interrogated by RBKC planners?
They would have had the plan layouts, they would have had any working drawings, whether it was to do with M&E, whether it's to do with the external envelope. They would have had access to all the material that was put together by the specialist designers. If there was any gaps, I would expect them to ask.
Right. Would you accept that, in fact, planners don't generally look at construction detail?
Generally not, but in this case, you appreciate the planners didn't want the cladding to have face fixings. So that was probably the only thing that the planners were interested in, was obviously the aesthetics of the building. But
yes.
that particular detail was something they had expressed interest in.
Yes, and the construction detail that they were looking at didn't, to your recollection at the time, did it go beyond looking at aesthetic matters, colour and texture and fixings?
I agree, the planners looked more at colour and texture.
Thank you. Now then, moving the story on into May 2014, you mentioned earlier on this morning that you were talking to the planners in May that year. Can we look at TMO 00851142, please? This is an email run in early May 2014, and if we look at the top of that page, we can see that you had sent an email to David Gibson on the 6th of May 2014, copying in Peter Madison. You see that?
Yes.
And it forwards an email that you'd received from Ryden. And can we please have the first and the second pages of this email run up together, if we can? You can see at the bottom of the first page, Simon Lawrence's email to you and Artelia, copied to Studio E and Ryden, Steve Blake internally. And he says, afternoon all, due to a pre-booked training course commitment I will not be able to attend Thursday's meeting with the RBKC planners. However, fortunately, Steve Blake, my director, he says, has offered his services to attend on my behalf. I'll bring Steve up to date with all of the information that I currently have. So if we look at the second page, under agenda points, which was just below the paragraph I'm showing you, he lists them, and in the first bullet point, it says, proposal of material, change to the facade, from zinc to aluminium composite, put forward our case that ACM is not an inferior product to zinc. Now, was ACM considered, or could be considered, inferior to zinc by the planners?
I don't know. I think obviously the architect had originally put in for a zinc finish, and that was probably on his early planning drawings. So I think it was a question that the planners may have asked, but I don't know that I would have had a view, well, so nobody had a view that it was an inferior product.
Now, at this stage, the planning consent, I think, was for zinc as a material, wasn't it?
The planning, sorry?
The current planning was for zinc itself.
The application, yes.
The application.
Yeah, the application drawings would have well, they would have had zinc on them.
Exactly.
Yes.
Was there any discussion about why it would be or might be that the cladders might think that ACM was an inferior product to zinc?
I don't know. I think zinc sounds expensive, but I don't know what the bottom line is on
Right.
that.
In what sense did you understand that Mr. Lawrence thought there was a risk that ACM could be seen as inferior? His word, inferior. What did you understand by that?
I don't know. I don't know what he was thinking when he put that down. I don't know whether zinc sounds more exotic, and ACM is a not so exotic sounding, but I don't know. I don't know why that.
His
that
evidence
way.
to the inquiry, which I'll summarise, at day 24, page 29, line 25 and following, was to the effect that he was only focusing on durability and aesthetics when considering whether ACM was or wasn't an inferior product. That was his understanding. That's what he told us. Would you agree with Simon Lawrence's assessment that there was a concern that the planners might be concerned about durability and aesthetics?
Yes, I think the planners were experienced, and they would be aware that it was a high building where winds, etc., may cause the cladding to move, fall off, whatever. But also, at the lower levels, there'd been some expression that the cladding needed to be more robust to prevent scratches or mechanical damage.
Yeah. Aesthetics, though.
Yeah, so all aesthetics.
Yes, so aesthetics. So there was no other, is this right, there was no other factor or feature of ACM as opposed to zinc that might make ACM inferior?
I can't think of anything, no.
Can we scroll up to the first page, please, of this email run? And this is your email that we started with. It says, David, our session with the planners, read the cladding, is this Thursday. And then in the second last paragraph, if you just look with me at that, you say, I think we will have to take a view based on our response on Thursday and perhaps get Laura to bring pressure to bear to see if we can get some reassurance prior to the final approval. Otherwise, our contract sum will be hanging out until the early July, potentially. Where you refer to Laura, is that Laura Johnson?
Yes.
Of RBKC?
Yes.
Was she in the planning department?
No.
No. Would Laura Johnson be able to bring pressure, your words, to the RBKC planning department?
I don't know.
Did you think that might be entirely appropriate or entirely inappropriate?
It would probably be something that wouldn't be in her remit, but I was suggesting it because my job is to facilitate the contract to see whether we could get a contract sum in place soonest. And as you say, it wasn't in her remit, and it was a suggestion I threw out that was probably ignored.
Yes. But you made it, and I just
did.
want to know why you thought it was appropriate to make a suggestion that Laura Johnson should do something outside her remit to bring pressure to bear on the planning department at RBKC. Can you explain?
I think it was me trying to, facilitate the contract and suggest that it may be something that could be considered. I don't know whether it was ever taken forward.
Well, by playing fast and loose with the proper boundaries of responsibility within RBKC.
I wouldn't say playing fast and loose. I would say we wanted to get our contract sum finalised, and obviously the cladding was a large element of that.
Yes. And shortly after this meeting, the planners went to visit some properties where similar cladding had been installed. I think one of those was in Kilburn. Do you remember that?
I know that they were offered visits, yes.
Can we look at RYD 405374, please? This is an email chain in late May 2014, and it's about the visit to Kilburn. And we can start, I think, with the second email on page 1. That's the email from Simon Lawrence on the 23rd of May 2014 to Bruce Soanes and you, Ms. Williams. You see that?
Yes.
And in the first paragraph, he talks about the cassette versus face-fixed. And in the second line says it's a discussion which will need to be made initially by TMO before it is presented to planners. And says that it would have a great could have a great bearing on the affordability of the scheme and justification of the spend to their residents. And if we go to page 2 of that email run and look at the last paragraph of the email, he says to you, as one of the addressees of this email, Claire, would you like the planners to go and see the Kilburn example to get an early indication, pre-sample mock-up, of their feelings around material choice? And then he says this, or is showing them cassettes a risk? By risk, this is what I want to ask you about. What did you understand he meant?
Sorry, can I see the first email again? Can I see the
Yes, of course.
upper page?
Let's go back to page 1. That's the first part of the email.
Yeah, my understanding is that
We can go back to the second page so that
thank
everybody
you.
can see what you're answering. Or is showing them cassettes a risk? And my question again, what did you understand?
that there was still a lot of discussion about face fixed, which is where you literally see sort of the fixings. You get circular fixings there, or the cassettes where the fixing is hidden. So he's just suggesting that I think the face fixed option was more economic. So I think that's what he's implying. But I think the planners were actually quite keen to have something that would be beautiful and last a long time. So I think whatever we'd shown them, they would have still made their own minds up.
He says, or is showing them cassettes a risk? And what I'd like to know, please, is what did you understand he meant by the word risk? Risk of what?
I believe that the face fixing was more economic. The cassette fixing was more expensive.
So did you understand that he meant that if they were shown cassettes, they might go for the more expensive option? Was that the risk that you understood him to mean?
I suspect it was the financial risk, but as you appreciate, that's what the planners ultimately went for. They did choose the most expensive fixing option because the aesthetics of it to them were preferable.
Yes, I just want to get with a precise, clear answer, Miss Williams. He used the word risk. Is showing them cassettes a risk? And I want to know what he meant, to your understanding, by the word risk. Did you understand him to mean that if the planners liked cassette, there was a risk that they would go for them, and that because they were more expensive, the TMO wouldn't achieve the maximum possible savings?
As I say, I believe it was a financial risk. The planners did choose cassettes, and therefore we did install that on the building.
Well, let's look at the top of the email chain. We can see that there's a reply to you from Simon Lawrence a few days later on the 29th of May 2014. And I say to you, you're copied in, as is David Gibson and Bruce Soames. And if you go down a little bit in the email, you can see that it says in the third line, there's a full stop, I'm afraid, which rather spoils the sense of it, but he says that, I'll take it from the second sentence, it's probably easier. KCTMOs and our feeling is that in order to progress the planning issue around cladding material and reduce the risk of affecting the procurement schedule, is to show the planners an example of an existing building in Kilburn, as referenced below, which has been completed from natural aluminium brushed ACM panel, albeit this building is in cassette form rather than face fix. Hopefully from a visit we can get their early buy-in for the finish stroke material, natural metallic and visually textured to be used. Provided this is acceptable, we then only have to convince them of the face fix rather than cassette by carrying out a mock-up on the side of Grenfell Tower. What are your thoughts? And my question is, were you aware that Ryden themselves wanted to convince the planners to choose the face fix for the cladding? It looks from this as if you were.
I believe that they'd used face fix before on a scheme called the Chowcots. It was something they were familiar with.
Did you yourself share Ryden's desire or ambition to persuade the planners to adopt face-fixed panels as opposed to cassette system panels?
I wanted them to make a decision. The decision was theirs to make. I wanted the decision to be made so that we could keep on with the contract procurement. I had no view over the fixing or the colour. It was not my area. My area was to keep the contract moving.
Are you telling us that you had no preference yourself, or the TMO had no preference itself, about whether cassette or face-fixed was selected by the planners?
I had no preference myself as to whether it was face-fixed or cassette.
Right. Well, let's go to your February 2019 statement and look at paragraph 34. And page 34. Page 34, I'm sorry, not paragraph 34, paragraph 191. And you say in that paragraph, a flat panel aluminium composite material, ACM, was proposed as the cladding material at higher levels, and that the flat ACM be face-fixed. My understanding was that aluminium was preferred because of the preferred colours available, which the planners were insistent on having. Now, aluminium, of course, was preferred to zinc on the grounds of cost as part of a value engineering exercise, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And in fact, it's right, isn't it, that you had to go through an amendment to the planning to swap ACM in and take zinc out, which didn't culminate until September 2014, when you got the approval. Is that right?
I don't know when the drawings were amended, but I believe we did get the approval, as you say.
And it's right, isn't it, that in fact all through that period, certainly from May to September 2014, both you and Ryden were as one, weren't you, in pushing the case for face-fixed aluminium?
I think that we wanted to move the project forward. So I personally had no view, and the planners were always going to be the ultimate decider as to what they wanted.
They were going to be the ultimate decider as to what they wanted, Miss
Yes.
Williams. But my question was, isn't it right that you and Ryden were as one, unanimous, in seeking to persuade the planners to adopt the face-fixed as opposed to the cassette?
I would not say that was the case. We wanted a decision made. I believe that the cost plan allowed for both options. I think it was that the face fix was the cheaper option, but I believe our cost plan had allowed for cassette fixing at that time.
And you wanted face-fixed as opposed to cassette because it was the cheaper option.
I didn't say that.
No, but I'm suggesting it.
I said that that was the cheaper option, but we just needed the project to move because we were already on site and we needed to procure the packages and we needed to know what we were procuring. So I would say the TMO was more programme orientated, even though budget is a big consideration, and it wasn't as clear-cut as you're saying.
Well, did you ever tell Ryden that you were indifferent to whether it was face-fixed or cassette?
I didn't personally. I don't know whether anybody else did. I suspect not. We just needed a resolution.
Did you ever tell Ryden that they needn't bother trying to persuade the planners at Kensington to adopt face-fixed over cassette? It was a waste of time because you were indifferent. You didn't mind. Did you tell them that?
No, we would not have phrased anything like that. That sounds unlikely. What we did was obviously say we need a decision made. Ryden had used face-fix before. They were familiar with that. They said it was an economic option, but the planners visited Kilburn. I don't know if they visited the Chalcotts as well, and they clearly had the preference not to have the fixings visible. So I think it was a battle that was never going to be won, and I don't think we laboured it the way you've explained.
What did you think at the time was the point of Ryden having all these meetings with planning in order to push the case for face-fix, if in fact, in the end, you didn't mind whether it was face-fixed or cassette?
The emphasis on the meetings wasn't all about whether it was face-fixed or cassettes. It was about the colours. It was about the colour was a graduated colour with different bands. It was a more general meeting with the planners. It wasn't purely just bashing away at one point.
I may come back to this question later in your evidence, Ms. Williams, but for the time being, let's move forward. Can I then ask you about the value engineering effect of ACM as opposed to zinc? Can we start with the 1st of April 2014 Contractors Induction meeting? Note ART 402256, please. Now, you were there, as we can see, as the third person down on the list of attendees. And I think I'm right in saying that you would have received this note or this minute before the next one. Is that right?
Yes.
So you would have had a chance to correct it. Can we go to page 2, item 2.1? And it says there, under proposed savings referenced in tender submission, there is a potential saving of up to £376,175 that could be realised through changes to the proposed cladding. Savings can be achieved by changing the material and the method of fixing. Changing from zinc to aluminium and using a face fixing rather than cassette would save the most money. Can you recall who said that?
I would assume it would be Ryden.
Does it represent an accurate record, to the best of your recollection, of Ryden saying what's recorded there?
I'll tell you took the minutes, but I would suspect that's a resume, yes.
Yeah. An accurate one? I know it's a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, and these minutes also say draft at the top, don't they? So I suspect it's a fair resume.
Right. Do you remember the figure, or a figure, being mentioned at the meeting?
There would have been a figure at this point, but I don't remember the quantum.
You don't? Okay. Do you think, doing the best you can, recalling it, that what figure they mentioned, and let's go with 376,175 because it's in the minute, do you think that that was the maximum amount of saving that Ryden could find? Or did you think it was the maximum amount that they were giving to you, regardless of whether they could get it for cheaper?
I think it was recorded, I think, as the maximum they could find.
But it is recorded as potential saving of up to £376,175 that could be realised through changes to the proposed cladding. I really want to get what your impression of what they said was. Did you think that that was the maximum amount that was available, or only the maximum amount that they were prepared to or willing to give you?
I thought it was the maximum amount that was available, because there would have been economies of scale on cladding and on the windows, because it was a substantial financial package. So that seemed to be the best that they could do.
Right. Do I take it from that you didn't know what prices Harley, as the putative subcontractor, cladding subcontractor, were offering Ryden at the time?
No, I wouldn't have known.
Were you aware at the time that Ryden did not offer and were not going to offer the TMO the full amount of savings that could be made?
No.
Would you have expected Ryden to pass on all of the savings that could be made in respect of the cladding to the TMO?
Yes, because they knew that we were looking to make a viable contract sum. So yes.
Can we go to RYD 404204, please? This is an email from Zach Maynard to Steve Blake. It's an internal Ryden email of the 8th of May 2014. So actually at the very time that you're discussing ACM with the planners, and you can see that the saving offered for aluminium face fix was 376,175. You see that? It's a familiar figure. Harley, 577k. See that?
Yes.
And Ali Cassette, saving offer 293,368. Harley, 420k. Alternative zinc face fix, saving offered 202,372. Harley, 280. Alternative zinc cassette, saving offered £100,406. Harley, £157,000.
Yes.
Those are the differences. My question is, having shown you that document, what would you have done had you discovered that Ryden were planning to pocket up to £200,000 odd difference between the savings Harley had offered Ryden and the savings Ryden was offering the TMO?
I would have taken it up to my managers.
Right. Would you have expected them to pocket £200,000 on the difference?
No.
Thank you. Did you understand at the time that if face-fixed was selected as opposed to cassette, face-fixed ACM as opposed to cassette ACM, Ryden would pocket a larger difference?
No, I didn't understand they were pocketing any difference at the time.
When did you first discover, did you ever discover until I'm showing you the documents, or perhaps until these hearings began this year, that Ryden had pocketed or stood to pocket £200,000 odd worth of difference?
I understood it when the hearing started, when Ryden gave evidence.
Did that come as a surprise to you?
Yes.
Can we just move on the story a little bit further then, into 2014, and look at the topic of value engineering? We start with ART 405977, please. Now, this is an email to you, from you, to Chui Chen Lim, dated the 16th of July 2014. And I should just warn you, Ms. Williams, the dating on these emails, which are internal Artelia emails I've done in the American style. So you start with the month and then you have the day. But that's not consistent, so we're doing our best to work out the dates. But this is an email from you to Chui Chen Lim on that date, 16th July 2014, and you say, "Hi Chui Chen, this is just an urgent nudge email. I've been reminded that we need good costs for Councillor Fielding Mellon and the planner tomorrow at 8:45 a.m. We discussed 1, fully cassette fixed cladding, columns and panels, fully faced fixed cladding, ditto, hybrid version." Now, first of all, when you say I've been reminded, who reminded you?
I would suspect Peter Madison.
Do you know why he reminded you?
Because I would think he would be meeting Councillor Fielding Mellon and the planner. I might have been there, I don't remember, but Peter would have been an attendee.
Right. You use the word good costs. Was that his expression to you or your expression to Chui Chen Lim?
That was my expression, and I'm meaning accurate. It doesn't say, I'm meaning accurate costs, because obviously we wouldn't want to present anything to a councillor and then have to change our mind.
I see.
By being too high, too low. So the idea was that they were accurate costs.
Not low. Not
Something
low
we
cost.
could stand by and not have to say, oh, we made a mistake, there was 20 grand difference. So accurate costs that we could put on the table and not have to change.
I see. So reliable.
Yeah, reliable.
I follow. Did you think that Councillor Fielding Mellon's decision was going to be based in any way on questions of price?
I don't know what Councillor Fielding Mellon, I don't know whether he was going to be making a decision. I think he wanted to have a look.
Why did you think at the time that Councillor Fielding Mellon would be interested in having reliable costs, particularly for the cladding?
He was local, and he was head of the RBKC department that I think it's called Housing and Regeneration or something of that sort. So he was an interested party and he lived locally. I think those are the main reasons why he would want to be aware of the situation.
Right. I can see why living locally might give him an interest in what it looked like. But could you just explain to me why him living locally might be relevant to the good costs that were needed?
I think that it was a case of, I think Peter led this, having full information at his fingertips. So I don't think Councillor Fielding Mellon would have particularly sort of interrogated the costs, but I think it was important that we had them available.
Can we go to Chui Chen Lim's witness statement, where she deals with this email? This is at ART 405817, page 34, please. And if we look at paragraph 114 there in the middle of the page, she recites the contents of this email that we've just looked at together. And then at paragraph 115, she says, Claire Williams was under pressure within the TMO on costs. Now, of course, this is Tweechin Lim's observation. Would you agree that at this time you were under pressure on costs?
Well, Chui Chen was a QS, so she would know about the costing area of the project rather than anything else. We were trying to finalise the contract cost, so for her, yes, this would have been on her radar, that I was talking to her specifically to see if we can get this resolved. But it wasn't specifically just on cost. As I say, we needed this to be resolved to move the programme forward, but that wasn't her area of the business.
Yes. I mean, is it right that you were under pressure within the TMO on costs, as she says?
To get them clear, yes, so that we knew what our budget was.
I see. Can I then turn to the topic of value engineering and just look at that briefly? Did the projects that you'd worked on before you joined the TMO have value engineering exercises associated with them?
Every project I've ever worked on had value engineering in it.
What did you understand value engineering to mean at the time of the Grenfell Tower project, and particularly in the first half of 2014?
Value engineering is about looking at options either of construction technique or alternative materials, which may be brought about because technology changes. There's different ways of doing things. Or it could be about alternative materials that are on the market, which perhaps the specification didn't include. But it's I think the critical bit is it's not about reducing the function. It's about looking at alternatives that actually meet the requirements. This was a design and build contract, but there are many partnering contracts where that is one of the first things you do. You sit down with contractor, client, other professionals, and you look at what the specification is and if there's a better way of meeting it. And say, quite often technology plays its part, as well as materials that people who work in those trades know that there's other options. So it's a useful exercise on every scheme. It's
Right.
standard.
Did you understand that there was a distinction between, on the one hand, value engineering aspects of design or the materials or products within the scope of a project, and on the other hand, reducing the scope of the project, in both cases, in order to come within budget?
Yes, as I say, I'm clear that value engineering isn't about reducing function, and particularly as a landlord, you want to put in the best quality materials you can because you then have the ongoing maintenance. So value engineering is well understood. It's quite constrained.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I've come to the end of that topic and the start of another topic, which is a substantial one, which I won't finish within 5 minutes.
Right, so that would be a convenient point. to have
If
a
that's
break.
convenient to you.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Well, I think Miss Williams will take a break slightly earlier than usual, but we'll take it at this stage. We'll come back at 11:30, please. And in the meantime, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Half past 11 then, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Would you ask Miss Williams to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Miss Williams, ready to carry on?
Yes. Can I just mention the issue of the diaries this morning? I was thinking,
What did you want to say about them?
can I just mention that obviously we were being advised by somebody prior to Kennedy's when this
Yes,
all
I think we
started.
understand that.
Yes, okay, that's
Yes.
fine.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Millett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Williams, I want to ask you some questions on the subject of Exova, and start with what you knew about Exova at the start. Now, can I go to your February 2019 statement, please, at page 28? And I'd like to look with you at paragraph 159. And you say there, I do not think I was aware of the involvement of Exova at that time. Just pausing there, this is at the time of your initial involvement. But I was later aware that they produced reports to Studio E, and I therefore assumed that they were engaged by Studio E to assist them with the tender specifications, specifically in relation to fire safety strategies. I'm aware that Exova produced reports to Studio E giving input to fire safety strategies. Now, I think, is it right that your assumption was based on the fact that Exova produced reports to Studio E?
Yes, they had produced, I'm aware of one report they'd produced to Studio E, yes.
Did you see that those reports, or that report, the one report, which led you to your assumption or conclusion?
I did. There was in the Stage D report, there was something dated the December 12, I think?
September.
September 12, was it? I don't know. But say the Stage D report had an Exova report that was from 2012. I hadn't met anybody from Exova.
Right.
And so I assumed that was the, they were sub-consultants to Studio E.
When do you think you first saw the Stage D report?
I suspect it was about the time I arrived. I was given a lot of paperwork, and I think it was fairly fresh about the time I arrived, or soon after. So it would have been September 13.
Did you ever check precisely by whom Exova had been engaged?
I had little information. I took over from somebody else doing the role, so there was little information in the directory. And I think I asked, but it was a little bit unclear at the time. I was trying to tidy up my spreadsheet, understand what costs we would be incurring, and it was a little bit unclear on Exova. That there was nothing that jumped out saying who'd appointed them.
Right. You've referred to this spreadsheet before, Miss Williams, and I'm not sure we know what you're talking about. Can you just enlighten us? What is the spreadsheet?
It's a cost spreadsheet which was updated monthly for my financial controller, and it has every cost on it that I would be aware of. So it has the works cost, it has all the consultants' fees, it has all the ad hoc costs like decanting costs. We had to pay additional planning fees, so it has items like that on it, and it's the whole scheme cost, whether it's just works or on costs.
Just help me explore this a bit. You say it's a cost spreadsheet which is updated monthly for my financial controller. First of all, who was the financial controller?
Magda Novak.
Right. And when you say it was updated monthly, does that tell us that it was amended monthly so that you wouldn't have a record of the previous month, or as it were, a rolling dynamic document, or did you produce a new one each month?
It was overwritten with the old one being saved. So there is a chronological record of what the costs were at each point.
And did you have your own hard or soft copy of this document or documents, or was it on a central platform or database?
It was in my own directory, but I would share it with Magda every month, and she would, effectively, we would check. I would check. I would say to her, these are the invoices I know that I've paid, and that's what the total figure is. She would look at the accounts that came via the central finance database to make sure that the two tallied. So we effectively did a reconciliation every month. But also mine would then show also potential future costs. So she would be aware of what was coming up.
Right. Do you know what happened to that document after the fire?
It would be in my directories.
What happened to your directories?
They are with my lawyers.
Right. You see, we've searched for those documents that you've referred to when you referred to them last week, and we've asked Kennedy's for them, and so far we've had no disclosure of them. Can you explain that?
No.
Right. Well, we'll see if we can pursue that. Going back then to where I think I had left off when asking you about the question of ex-over, you say you took over from somebody else doing the role.
Yes.
And you think you asked. Who did you ask about what ex-over were doing, and particularly who they'd been retained by?
The person I took over from was a temporary project manager, Sasha Kurdistan. He wasn't clear either.
So you asked him, did you? You asked Sasha?
Yes,
Right.
I did. And he just referred me to the directory, but there was no information there. So then I believe I would have spoken to David or Peter, and then probably Studio E ultimately to find out. Or perhaps Atelier, because I did have a session with Atelier on all the different appointments.
And what did any of those people tell you about by whom ex-over had been retained?
The wisdom was that they were sub-consultants to Studio E, but that the TMO were responsible for paying them.
Right, the wisdom. That doesn't really tell me much. Who said what? Do you remember?
I don't remember. It would be over a protracted period, because when I first started, as I say, I talked to the people who were involved at the time, and I had the directory, which should have had appropriate documents in. It was a little bit scant on information in relation to ex-over.
Right. Given that you discovered that the TMO were responsible for paying them, did you not think that it was your responsibility to make sure you knew what it was that ex-over were producing in return for the fees that you were paying?
They were working to Studio E, so it was a slightly different basis of appointment. So I didn't instruct them to do anything. It was Studio E who'd instructed them in terms of the scope of their services, is my understanding.
You say they were working to Studio E, but you were paying them.
Yes.
But my question is, given that you were paying them, didn't you want to see the work product?
I had seen the report that was in the Stage D report, and they were clearly involved in the project because I was copied in on emails throughout.
You say they were clearly involved in the project. Well, we'll come to see the reports they do. But my question is, as a general question, given that the TMO was responsible for paying ex-over's fees, were you not keen to make sure that you were given and read whatever it was that ex-over produced from time to time?
I understand what you're saying, but I think at the time I was looking more to understand what the total fee cost incurred would be. And I understood that Studio E had appointed them, and I didn't interrogate that, but Studio E was still involved with them, so I assumed that they were getting the product they wanted.
That was an assumption you made without asking, is it? Or did you actually ask them?
I don't remember asking Studio E, are you getting what you want from ex-over?
Let's go to TMO 00855 925, please. This is an email chain between you and Terry Ashton at Exover in November 2013, so only a couple of months or so after you'd arrived. He sets out the stage that he considers Exover has reached. Do you see?
Yes.
He says, our fee proposal for providing consultancy services on the project was sent to Bruce Soanes. This was in May 12. This was for RIB stages C and D to E. Total fees were £8,600 plus VAT. And then he goes on. Works for stage C have been completed. With regards to stages D to E, we have issued 2 invoices. One dated the 19th of December 2012 for £489 plus VAT. One dated 30th of September 2013 for £973.50p plus VAT. We are about to issue a further invoice for £851.75p plus VAT. This will bring the total invoices to £2,314.25p, which leaves a balance of £5,300 minus £2,314.25 equals £2,985.75p plus VAT. Now, I've said all that out to you. Those are detailed figures. You told us that you thought Exover was Studio E's subconsultant.
Yes.
What did it occur to you to ask why Exover were writing to you about invoicing and payment?
I think when you asked who I asked about Exover, I think I must have struggled to get a response. So it looks here as though I actually went to the horse's mouth and said, "What is your fee? What is the commitment fee-wise that we have made?"
Right. Well, let's see if we can pursue that. You said you went to the horse's mouth. Was the horse Mr. Ashton?
As the Exover rep, yes, it
Right.
looks.
Let's go to EXO 50575 then, please. This is an email from you to Exover on the 6th of November 2013. It's sent to William Blair at Exover, copy to Peter Madison and Margaret Trina at Exover. William, I have just had this week from Terry Ashton the basis of your fee quotes. Apologies, but I have just taken over this role, and the electronic directories did not have adequate information, so I could confirm the validity of the invoice. Just pausing there, is that you going to the horse's mouth?
It is.
Right, so the horse, in fact, was William Blair, not Terry Ashton.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter. You then say, now I have Terry as a contact, I'll be able to pick up any queries with him. Apologies for the delay. The invoice will be with our finance administrator this week, as will the one just issued. So by November 2013, you were at least familiar with the fact that Exover were involved in the Grenfell Tower project in some way.
Yes.
Yes. And am I right in thinking that you were the point of contact for Exover, at least on invoicing matters, from this time?
Yes, as you say, this invoicing was my main priority initially, yes.
Were you aware by this time, early November 13, that Exover had been asked to produce 2 strategies, one for the building in its existing state and one for the refurbishment?
I'm aware they did one for the refurbishment. I have heard from the hearing that they did an existing one, but I wasn't aware of that at the time. I've only understood that in the last month or so.
Right, so just to be crystal clear, there is in existence, and there's been plenty of evidence about it, a document which is a draft called an existing fire safety strategy, produced and dated the 16th of August 2012, which names the TMO as a client. Is that a document you've ever seen, do you think?
No, I wasn't aware of it, and I am not aware of it.
Now, you say in your last answer but one that you were aware they did one for the refurbishment. Can you be clear in your mind what you are talking about?
Yeah, the one that brought them to my attention first of all was the Stage D report, and that was the report dated 2012.
And you mentioned December, in fact.
I thought it was December, I don't know if I'm...
But a 2012 document.
Is it? Yeah, I was going to say, I might have got the month wrong, but it's 2012.
Now, looking at the emails about the invoices that we've been talking about a moment ago, you were told that there'd been a balance of £2,985 odd pounds left from the fee quote.
Yes.
Did you understand from that as at November 2013, Exova expected that there was more work to be done on the Grenfell Tower project?
Can I just go back to the email? Because I focused on what I thought was the final figure.
Yes, certainly. It's TMO 00855925.
Thank you. So, sorry, would you ask your question again, sir?
Yes. Looking at this email, and looking in particular that there was still £2,985 plus VAT left as a balance. In other words, work not done as part of the quotation, because there was still money to be paid to them. Did you understand that Exova expected that there was more work to be done?
I don't know that I did, because this talks, the second paragraph from the bottom says we're about to issue a further invoice. Bring invoices to... Yeah, no, I wasn't clear. I would say I wasn't clear. No.
Right, you weren't clear. Did you try to get clarity about what it was that would represent the balance of £2,985 odd of work which Exova were yet to do?
No, I would be focusing on the first paragraph, which said the total fees were £8,006 plus VAT. I would be putting that into my spreadsheet.
Right. But
I wouldn't be thinking about the scope of work they had left. I would just be looking at the financial commitment.
Right. But in doing that, you would understand that of the £8,600 plus VAT agreed, only some 5,300 had been used up, leaving an either work in progress or work not yet done of £2,985. Would that not have registered with you?
I don't remember, but I understand what you're saying now.
Yes.
But I don't remember at the time thinking, oh, there's that much due. But I probably would have when I put it into the spreadsheet. That
Right.
probably would have been crystal.
Okay, well, let's see if we can get at it slightly differently. When you started at the TMO, is it right that the employer's requirements were being developed for the tender?
Yes.
Did you look at them?
Because they were produced and sent out as a tender probably within 2 months of my arrival, I had a lot to look through. But what I did do, I did glance through them. Again, just looking at headings, looking at topics that they covered.
Did you look at the documents that were provided with the tender documents, that comprised the tender documents?
I would have looked at what I might have understood more than the bits I didn't understand. So I probably would have looked at, for example, the new flats rather than the M&E specification, which would have been something I wouldn't have even got an understanding of.
Now, the tender documents that were produced in November and went to all the bidders did have with them a version of Exova's outline fire safety strategy. In other words, a fire safety strategy for the refurbishment, as it stood at November 2013. Did you appreciate that?
I can't say that I'd seen it, no.
Let's look at EXO 401106, please. This is an outline fire safety strategy, as it says, produced by Exova, and it's a report to Studio E, date 7th of November 2013, issue number 3. That's the first page of it. Is that familiar to you?
It's a similar frontispiece as the 2012 report, so I don't remember that date.
Right.
I don't know whether it went straight into the tender. I don't know whether it went to Studio E, but I'm not aware of reading this.
Right. Let me try it differently. When you read the tender documents that went out to the bidders, do you remember seeing annex over document that looked like this?
I don't remember seeing any ex-over information in the tender. It could have been, I just didn't look at that area. As I say, I would have looked at the areas that interested me, not the whole tender, because it would have not been something I would have got to grips with.
Whose job was it within the TMO to make sure, as the client, that the tender documents were complete and in order?
The tender was compiled by Atelier, and I would expect them, as part of their contractual responsibility, to make sure everything was in there. Obviously, they were our CDMC, and one of the CDMC roles is to make sure that the tenderers have all the information that is required to allow them to do their tender and understand what any safety implications are of the work. But I would expect Atelier to have looked at the documents compiled for us.
Did anybody within the TMO have any responsibility to ensure that the tender documents were complete and in order?
Again, we would have relied on our professional consultants, because they all had responsibilities under the contract to make sure the paperwork was there.
You see, this is a tender exercise that was the subject of detailed consideration and advice from Atelier for many months during 2013, which culminated in the sending out of a tender package to bidders, having gone through a PQQ process in the November of 2013. And what I'm trying to get at is, was anybody within the TMO responsible for making sure that the tender package that went out, that the TMO was conducting in relation to the tender, was what the TMO wanted to send out?
I believe that, like myself, others would have looked at this. This had been on the table. Obviously, it had gone to Leadbetters previously. So I believe it will have been looked at, but ultimately it was the responsibility of Atelier to make sure that it was complete.
Leaving aside the question of legal responsibility for the moment, if that's what you understand by my question, in common sense or simple terms, who was interested in the TMO in just checking and making sure that the tender documents were complete and in order, if anybody?
I think that probably David Gibson would have looked at them earlier on when they'd gone to Leadbetter. Obviously, they're in a new version now. I cast my eye across them, but as I say, my interest would only be in certain areas, and I wouldn't have the understanding as to enough about the project at this time to know what should be there and what shouldn't be there.
Who was, sorry, let me try this. Was anybody in the TMO given the role of signing off the tender package?
Not that I'm aware.
Does that tell us that nobody actually gave instructions to Atelier, final instructions, to send it out?
I don't remember giving instructions to Atelier to send it out. I believe they would have said, we have everything in the package ready for tender. Are you happy for it to go out? So it would have been slightly differently put, that they were compiling the tender documents as under their role, that they would say to us, we think we're ready to go. Are we good to send it out now? And we would have said yes.
Right. Are you happy for it to go out? Are we good to send it out? Those are two questions. Who did Atelier ask those questions of?
I would suggest that it would probably be Jenny or any of the TMO team, because obviously by this point it would only be going to the 5 tenderers, so we would have already seen the draft letter that was going with it. So we would have said, yes, please go now, because obviously the whole programme of works was predicated by the tender going out in a timely way.
You say, I would suggest that it would probably be Jenny. Do you actually recall who it was who took the final decision within the TMO to instruct Artelia to send out the tender package?
No, I don't remember specifically.
Thank you. Did anybody tell you, or did you discover from such reading that you did, that there were aspects of the external wall construction which Exova said that they would consider in a future issue of their report?
No.
Did anybody have a discussion with you about this report at any stage during the tender process?
No.
Did anybody have a discussion with you about this report at any stage thereafter?
No.
Can we go to page 9, please? And I'll just ask the question I asked a moment or two ago in a more targeted way. At the top of that page, you can see paragraph 3.1.4, compliance with B4 external fire spread. And Exova say this: it is considered that the proposed changes will have no adverse effect on the building in relation to external fire spread, but this will be confirmed by an analysis in a future issue of this report. Did you know, or did you ever become aware that Exova had made that statement?
No.
Can you explain why you, as the person nominally at least in charge of the project, Grenfell Tower project within the TMO, did not know that?
It was not pointed out to me, but also the Stage D planning report, or Stage D report, was about the cladding. So I would assume any further reports from 2012 would actually cover the cladding, because it was already in the Stage D report. The Stage D report was very clear that there was going to be external cladding, and it talked about what the options were.
Well, in both the Stage D report and indeed the NBS specification, which was a much more recent document, both put zinc forward as the primary cladding material. That's right, isn't it? You knew that, at least that much.
I don't know that it was only zinc in Stage D. I think because we hadn't made any decisions, I think it might have mentioned alternatives. But otherwise, it was clear that the building was going to be clad.
And at this stage, November 2013, no decision had been reached about what the product or material to be used in the external wall by way of rain screen had been made.
True.
Now, it would follow from that any fire strategy produced in November 2013 could never have been final and complete, because it couldn't, on any view, have taken into account the cladding as it was later to be chosen for this building. Do you accept that?
Yes, I wonder why it wasn't picked up. As I say, I do accept it, yeah.
Can we then go to the minutes of the Contractors' Induction meeting, 1st of April 2014, a document we've looked at together, Miss Williams, a number of times already. ART 402256. This is the meeting we can see that you were at, as well as Peter Madison and David Gibson. And if we go to page 4, at 5.3 on that page, we can see that under Novation of Designers, it says, Exova completed the fire strategy at tender stage. I'll read the whole thing to you and come back to that first sentence. They have not been novated, but SL will contact them with the view of using them going forward. Now, just looking at the first sentence, Exova completed the fire strategy at tender stage. Given that at tender stage, so between November 2013 and the end of March 2014, or mid-March 2014, the cladding hadn't been decided. Do you accept that you couldn't have had a complete and finalised fire strategy by the 1st of April 2014?
Yes, their report said they wanted to do a further report, didn't it? Yeah.
Who was it who said, do you remember, that Exova had completed the fire strategy at tender stage?
I don't know. I don't know.
Did you realise at the time that Exova had not completed the fire strategy at tender stage, precisely because of the paragraph about external fire spread that I've just shown you in the 7th of November 2013 report?
No.
The minute then continues, they have not been novated, but SL, that's Simon Lawrence, will contact them with the view of using them going forward. Do you remember who said that?
I don't know. Obviously, Atelier did these minutes, so I don't know if they led on the subject or whether Simon Lawrence did. I don't know.
Very well. And it says indeed SL is in the action box, so it could be one of those two. When it was said that he would contact Exova with the view of using them going forward, using them for what?
I thought that they were going to be part of their design team.
Whose design team?
Ryden's.
For what? Using them for what purpose?
I don't know. I don't know enough about what the fire strategy there. I don't know enough about the ins and outs of it, but it looks as though they should have been a member of Ryden's design team.
Right. Did you follow up with Ryden, your, at this stage, proposed contracting party, to see whether or not Simon Lawrence had contacted them with the view of using them?
I'm aware that this minute goes on several times and that clearly it didn't go anywhere. I think Simon had said he would contact them, but the minute is never tied up, is it? It's not resolved.
Well, you're reading ahead, I think, in the story. And so let's just take it in stages. I think you were at the pre-start meeting on the 13th of June 2014, weren't you? ART 402495. Let's just look at that. This is an Artelia note of that meeting. We can see you were present,
Yep.
the first person in the list of those present. And if we can go to page 2, you can see that under, I think it's page 3 actually, I'm so sorry. Item 3.5, a quarter of the way down the page, it says SL to appoint other consultants to include fire after the main subcontractors are on board. So that was an action point minuted at that meeting. Did you follow up after that meeting to find out what Simon Lawrence had done by way of action?
No, we waited for the next meeting for him to update us.
Well, let's go to those minutes. That's 15th of July. This is progress meeting number 1 now. ART 402614. And let's look at page 2 in that. And if we look at item 1.8 there, please, third of the way down, SL to appoint other consultants to include fire. Clearly he wasn't reporting back.
Yes.
Did you say to him, what have you done?
No, but I would expect Atelier as employer's agent, whose role was to make sure that the project team had no gaps, to pick this up. They were doing the minutes and they were managing the contract. So I would expect Atelier to be clear that they should be pursuing this.
I see. We get to the next meeting on the 16th of September 2014, which is progress meeting number 3. And I'll just read the reference in, RYD 3018299. And then again, progress meeting number 4 on the 21st of October 2014 at ART 403067. And on each of those occasions, the minutes recorded exactly the same thing, namely that Simon Lawrence was to appoint other consultants to include fire. Now, on none of those occasions do we see you recording him, chasing him up or asking him questions as to why, despite the numerous action points throughout the previous few months, he hadn't got round to appointing a consultant on fire. Is that right?
I think there were lots of things going on in the project. He had lots of elements of work to put in place, but this should have been something that he was thinking about. Possibly he was, but I say it wouldn't be my role within the project team to do that. It would be Atelier as employer's agent to make sure that there were no gaps in the project team.
Ms. Williams, you said that on a number of occasions, and I'm getting the impression that you just left everything to Artelia and didn't take much of an interest in what was going on. Would that be fair?
No, that wouldn't be fair. No. My role was to manage the client side, not manage the contract.
But this is a project for the client, and you are the client, so to speak. So I just thought possibly you might take a greater interest in the project.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, but bear in mind that Exova were on board before I wasn't clear what their appointment was about initially. I've never dealt with fire strategy in terms of occupied refurbishment. So it was something that I was picking up from somebody else, and to say, I think that hindsight is great, isn't it? But I think that it was clearly there. It was minuted by Artelia. I'm not sort of trying to shirk responsibility, but it was part of their role to ensure that the appropriate consultants were on board to complete the project. And say I had interest in all of the project all of the time, but this was something that I wasn't clear on, obviously, and I expected others who are professionally employed to do so to look after on our behalf.
All right, thank you.
We come, when we do, to the minutes of progress meeting number 5 on the 18th of November 2014, and there's no reference in there to Simon Lawrence or anybody else appointing consultants relating to fire. The matter seems to have slipped off the radar by then. Now, just looking back at it, we've had the reference on the 1st of April at the Contractors Induction meeting. We've had the pre-start meeting 13th of June, which I've shown you. We've had the reference in the progress meeting number 1 on 15th of July, and 2 further references on the 16th of September and the 21st of October 2015 to Simon Lawrence appointing a fire consultant. It's been repeatedly referred to, and it looks as if it was pushed down the track and down the track and down the track a number of different times. My question is, when you got to the autumn of 2014, despite the fact that Artelia was there at the meeting and having the role of CDMC, why didn't you as the client say to Ryden, look, you've been promising to appoint a fire consultant now as an action point for months. Have you done it?
Artelia were leading the meetings. They went through the minutes in order. I don't know why that conversation was never had, but I know they appointed the other consultants listed there. So I can't explain why nobody agitated.
Were you not curious to know why he hadn't appointed a fire consultant as he had been indicating he was going to on repeated occasions?
I believe that the other consultants were appointed a long way down the road, the DDA and the acoustic person. So I think I assumed it was that the appointment wouldn't be needed until a later stage, but I think, because I wasn't involved with the inception of this, I did miss the initial input into the fire strategy, what it was doing and what it was about, because I would have been more alerted if I had been more aware.
Did you notice at the time you saw the minutes of this meeting, or rather, perhaps I should show it to you, to be fair. Can we go to ART 403150, please? These are the minutes of progress meeting number 5 of the 18th of November 2014, and one can scan through them. Take it from me, there's no reference at all in this meeting note to Mr. Lawrence appointing a fire consultant. So the matter had clearly dropped off the radar. And my question is, did you notice at the time when you received these minutes that unlike all the previous minutes running back to April, there was no longer any reference to Simon Lawrence appointing a fire consultant?
No, I didn't. And looking at the attendees of this meeting, the person who would do the minutes would possibly be Nick Valenti, who was a new assistant project manager to Philip. So it could be that he said, do you want me to keep this in the minutes? And it slipped out with the new personnel.
Well, you're speculating.
I'm speculating.
Well, don't.
100% speculating.
Well, don't,
Apologies.
So the answer to my question, you didn't notice when you saw the minutes?
No.
Now, Simon Lawrence told the inquiry when he gave evidence that Ryden had made a positive decision not to appoint a fire consultant. And he said he did so as a team. And the reference to that is day 23, page 80, at lines 8 to 22. I don't think you need to see that. My question is, did Ryden ever tell you about any positive decision that they had made not to appoint a fire consultant?
No.
Can you explain why Ryden would not have shared that with you?
No.
Simon Lawrence also told us in his evidence that Exova was only going to provide advice on the lower 4 floors. And again, just for the reference, it's day 23, page 48, line 17, and there's no need to look at that. And also day 23, page 66 at line 3. Again, no need to look at that. Did Ryden ever tell you that it wasn't their usual practice to appoint a fire consultant?
No.
Did Ryden ever tell you that they were only considering a fire consultant in relation to the lower 4 floors?
No.
Did the TMO ever agree that fire consultancy services would be limited to an analysis of the lower 4 floors of the building?
No.
Now, after November 2014, which is where we've got to in the story on this point, did you know that Exova was still working from time to time on the Grenfell Tower project?
Yes, I was being copied into emails with their name on it.
Yes, and you were getting the invoices too?
Possibly, yes.
Yes. Given that you were getting the invoices, did you realise that Ryden had not appointed a fire consultant themselves?
I didn't pick up that.
Could you go to EXO 401205, please? This is an invoice, as a copy invoice, addressed to the TMO. And if you look at the top right-hand corner, it delivered CC to Peter Madison and Claire Williams. You see that?
Yes.
Your email address. And the substance of it is the invoice is numbered. The invoice date is the 18th of February 2015, and the description is upgrade works RIBA stage D to E. Invoice for consultancy services provided on above project during November 2014. You see that? And the sum of £118 plus VAT. £118 plus VAT is charged. Now, it's not a great deal of money, but did you wonder at the time what the consultancy services work in November 2014 was, for which they charged £118 plus VAT?
No.
Did you sanction payment?
Yes.
Why did you sanction payment for something when you didn't know what it was?
I believe it was within the fee proposal they'd already given me.
It may have been, but did you not want to know what the work was that they were doing on a continuing basis?
No, because I would have looked at this thinking it's a mop-up of the fee at the end of the financial year.
Well, it does say invoice for consultancy services provided on the above project during November 2014, you see.
Yes.
And I just want to know whether you asked yourself, well, I wonder what those services are, given that Simon Lawrence was going to appoint a consultant, a fire consultant.
No, I assumed it would have been residual fee for what they'd been working with Bruce on.
But that was an assumption. You never investigated.
No, I didn't investigate.
Right. Can we go back to RYD 3075860, please? Now, this is an email exchange much later in the story, in April 2016, principally between you and David Hughes at Ryden. And David Hughes responds to an email that you sent him on the 27th of April, at the top of the page there. You see that?
Yes.
And he says to you, "Hi Claire, please see answers below to the best of my knowledge. Any questions, please give me a call."
Right.
And if we look at the email from you, we can see, and I hope it's clear on the version you get, that your email questions are in black and his responses he's typed in blue. Do you see that?
Yes.
And if you ask him at paragraph 1 in black, "Can I please have a copy of the latest fire strategy document? I have an original version, but want to make sure it has not changed. Drawings would be useful." And his response in blue is, "Ex-over fire strategy attached, not updated from tender as far as I'm aware, and fire strategy drawings attached to be updated to as-built, question mark, close bracket."
Yes.
Now, and attached to this email is the outline fire safety strategy of November 2013. And just to be absolutely clear and put that in front of you, can we please have RYD 3075861? This is what he attaches.
Okay.
It's a different disclosure number from the one I showed you, but it is the same document.
Yes.
Just looking at it closely, it's to Studio E, it's dated the 7th of November 2013, and it's issue 3, yes?
Yes.
So when you got David Hughes's email in the April of 2016, am I right in thinking that you would have seen this document then?
If he attached it, yes.
Well, we can see he did attach it.
Yes.
Right. Does that tell us that between November 2013 and the end of April 2016, when you received this document, that's a period of 2.5 years, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. In that 2.5 year period, there had been numerous changes to the design, hadn't there? The design of the tower.
At the lower levels, yes.
Well, there'd also been changes to the rain screen cladding, yes?
Yes.
There'd also been, do you recall, a change, or an apparent change at least, to the specification of the insulation.
I wouldn't have known that.
Right. Did you also know, perhaps you didn't, that insulation had been put onto the building which wasn't even in the specification?
I wouldn't have known that either.
Did it occur to you, given the time between the tender and April 2016 to the 2.5 years, that there was a chance at least that this document dated November 2013 might be materially out of date?
I'd assumed that it may be updated as my email, but when he responded, he said he hadn't been updated as far as he was aware. So I assumed that they were on board but hadn't updated it.
When you got this document, did you read it?
I don't know. I can't remember seeing it recently, so I don't remember what's in it, I'm afraid.
Well, he sent it specifically to you in response to your
Yeah.
in response to a question you'd asked him.
Right.
Is there any reason why you wouldn't have read it?
No, I would like to see the rest of it because I don't know whether I absorbed it or not.
Okay,
The front page is similar to the one I'd seen from
Yes,
2012.
indeed, it's got that rather fancy design on it. But certainly, let's look at the first page, or the second page of the email. The first page of the. There's the revision history, and if we go to the second page, or next page, there's the list of contents. You see that?
Yes.
And then the next page, introduction.
Yes.
With a statement of the refurbishment that notably omits any reference to the cladding. Do you think you might have noticed that?
No, I hadn't noticed that.
And then let's turn the page again. I'm just going to show you this document.
Yeah, thank you.
And then statutory considerations, headings, building regulations, regulatory reforms, Fire Safety Order 2005, London Building Acts. And then next page, compliance with the building regulations. And he deals here with B1, means of warning and escape. Is that something you remember seeing in April 16?
No. Can we see what the revision was? Does he highlight in this what the revision was from the 2012 one?
Well, we can go back to the first page, the second page, and see that. We can see some dates, but no, we can't see track changes. If that's what.
That's what I was wondering. What changed?
But we can't. But we can show you if you want two documents dated 2012. There's a design note of the 12th of September 2012, and then there is the issue 1 of the outline fire safety strategy dated the 31st of October 2012, which would have been in very similar form to this.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I understand. So I would have probably opened this and just thought, thank you, and I would have put it in a directory. I wouldn't have understood enough to know, or read it in detail to know that it was something that wasn't complete.
Right. Well, can we go to page 9 then again and just look at paragraph 3.1.4 under the heading Compliance with B4 External Fire Spread. I'll read it. Yeah, I'll read it again. It's now a familiar paragraph. It is considered that the proposed changes will have no adverse effect on the building in relation to external fire spread, but this will be confirmed by an analysis in a future issue of this report. Now, here you are. You get this document. This paragraph is in it. Did you read this paragraph?
No.
Can you explain why not?
I had assumed that it was complete. I hadn't read that paragraph. Because clearly it was in the 2012 report, and it seems to be the same paragraph in this report as well.
Yes. And can you explain why you didn't notice that?
No, I didn't look at it. I knew that Exova had been involved in the scheme during the progress of works, and so I didn't read this paragraph to understand that they're still talking about a future issue.
Let's look at your response to his email, which is at RYD 3075983. And you say to him, this is the 28th of April, Dave, this still has the old TMO office. I think the fire strategy stuff may have been superseded on this basis. What old office address are you referring to?
In the body of the building, it was initially proposed that the TMO office would stay in the main building. Subsequently, because we had to decant the office out of the building for works, we used the office space to provide new flats. So I must have looked at it in terms of the drawing and seen that the office was showing up in the layout. So that's where I'm saying, has it been superseded? Because I'm seeing in the drawing office, whereas I know there is no office in the building anymore.
So you think you got that from the drawing?
Yes.
Right. So did that tell you, at the very least, that the original fire safety strategy that you had received was now out of date and that the one that he was sending you needed to be studied.
What he did say in his previous email was that it needed to be as built. So the office location was possibly in the same place as the flats. It may have been just the naming of it. So that didn't alert me to any issues. I just saw that the office was there as I knew it was flats. But that didn't alert me because I believe the footprint was the same.
Well, let's just then go back, having covered that point off, to your original email, which started this chain off and which prompted Mr. Hughes to send you the 7th of November 2013 fire strategy. You ask him the question, and I'll repeat it, can I please have a copy of the latest fire strategy document? I have an original version, but want to make sure it has not changed. Drawings would be useful. And then he attaches the fire strategy attached, not updated from tender as far as I'm aware, and fire strategy drawings attached to be updated as built. And my question is, having asked him the question, and having actually specifically asked him for the latest fire strategy document, because you had an original version but wanted to make sure it hadn't changed, can you explain why you didn't read the fire strategy report he was sending you, done by Exova, to make sure that it hadn't changed?
I think I clearly looked at the drawings because that's how I raised my future issue. But it looks to me as though I didn't read the report because he's saying the strategy has not updated from tender as far as he's aware. So it should be a similar report.
But you didn't read it the first time, you told us before.
No.
So why didn't you read it this time?
Because it was the same report in essence. That's
But
what he's
it
told
was the same
me.
report as the one you hadn't read. Given that you are asking for this document, why didn't you take the opportunity to read it now? Given that this was, as you say, the first time you'd seen this document.
Yeah, no, I would have looked at the drawings expecting them, because I'm here looking to put together the health and safety file. So I'm thinking, can I have the drawings, which most people would expect to be part of this package? So I suspect I would have looked at the drawings, and because there was nothing on the paperwork to say anything had changed, he said nothing has changed. So I would have assumed that it passed muster, because obviously it was the same document as went to tender.
So can you just explain in a sentence why you didn't look at the report that he was attaching, given that this was the first time, so you say, you were being shown this document?
I believed it was the same document I'd seen before. I suspect it wasn't, because I think I'd only seen the December 12 one, and that clearly said November 13. But I assumed it was exactly the same, and as I say, it was appropriate at tender, therefore it should be a professionally produced document that would be suitable at completion.
Have you any explanation to give us about why you didn't notice in April 2016 that Exova were, according to the document you were being sent, promising a confirmation of their view in a future issue of a report, which by that stage you had not had?
No.
Can we go to CST 402141, please? This is an email from you. I'm so sorry, I'm looking at the second email down. It's from you to Janice Ray on the 23rd of May 2016. Subject Grenfell FRA. And you say, Janice, this is the information on the FRA. The last drawing gives the typical floor plans as well as the new, so I think this should be sufficient for Carl's purposes and won't require him doing any sketching. This is the first item on my list from Friday, so the other info will trickle through. Maybe we can sort more after our Tuesday AM visit. And if we go up to page 1, we can see an email on the 23rd of May 2016, same day, only about 20 minutes or so later. And this, I'm afraid you'll have to take from me, is to Carl Stokes. And I'm sorry, but the identity of the addressee has been removed because it's a private email address. But leave that on one side. C is Carl Stokes. And Janice Ray says to him, Claire has provided another copy of the Exova fire strategy and floor plans, which you raised in the FRA action plan. Are these plans now sufficient? Now, take it from me that this attachment is issue 3 of the Exova outline fire safety strategy.
Yeah.
Just for the record, it's CST 402142. Do I understand it from this email run that you must have read the November 2013 outline fire safety strategy before you sent it to Janice Ray?
No, I don't remember reading the report. I would have looked at the floor plans. Probably,
Right.
but
Only the floor plans. Is that right?
that's, yeah, I picked up about the floor plan being wrongly named, so I clearly picked that up. I don't remember reading the report.
Right. So we've seen you receiving the issue 3 of the Exova outline fire safety strategy at the end of April from David Hughes, and we see you passing it on to Janice Ray at the end, towards the end of May 2016. Am I right in thinking that on neither occasion did you take the trouble to read the document?
I don't remember reading it.
Let's turn then to a different topic, although still linked, I suppose, loosely to the last one, which is the FRA's actions relating to cladding. Now, you've given evidence in a number of your witness statements about the fire risk assessments done by Carl Stokes Limited at various times. Now, in Module 1 of this inquiry, I only want to ask you about one action which appeared on Carl Stokes' FRA of October 2014. Can we go to your February 2019 witness statement, please, at page 42? And I want to go on that page to paragraph 236 and 237. You say in 236, I am aware that on the 17th of October 2014, Carl Stokes conducted a fire risk assessment, and then you give the reference to it, for Grenfell Tower under the regulatory reform order. As indicated, I believe I would have seen a copy of the fire risk assessment at the time, and it recorded, amongst other things, that the evacuation strategy for residential areas was a stay put, which Carl Stokes confirmed meant that residents remain within their own dwelling during a fire incident, unless the fire were in that dwelling or it were otherwise affected, in which case they should immediately evacuate the dwelling and call the fire and rescue service. Now, first, who was it within the TMO who received the FRAs, or fire risk assessments, for Grenfell Tower?
They would be sent to Janice Ray, the Health and Safety Manager.
As a matter of general practice, would she then send those on to you?
She'd send them on to the appropriate worker, yes.
Well, would she send them on to you?
For Grenfell, yes.
For Grenfell, yes. Can we then go to the FRA itself, which you exhibit to paragraph 236 of your statement? It's TMO 100042446, please. Now, we can see what this is. It's a fire risk assessment for Grenfell Tower for the TMO by Carl Stokes on the 17th of October 2014. You see that?
Yes.
And if we go to the bottom of the page, it says the significant findings and action plan of this fire risk assessment are inserted next with this document continuing on page 2. Now, the document itself is at CST 6094, and we'll come to that in just a moment. Before I do you remember when you saw this document that the significant findings and action plan constituted a separate document, but should be read into this document?
I think they were delivered together, so that would be the assumption.
Yes. Did you understand that the FRA was produced to the TMO essentially in two parts or two documents? This one and the Record of Significant Findings and Action Plan, which should be read with it.
Yes.
Yes. Now, let's look at the Record of Significant Findings and Action Plan, dated the 17th of October 2014. That is at CST 6094. This is its first page. You can see the date, 17th of October 2014. Do you recognise this document?
Yes.
You do. You can see that there are items down the left-hand column, and then they're given a priority. And a red box is a high priority, as we can see there. And then, casting the eye across the page, you see identified risk or hazard, actions to be taken, by whom, and date to be completed by. And can you see that in this version of the document, the two columns on the right are blank? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if we go to page 10 of this document, this is coloured red. It's high risk or high priority. And the identified risk or hazard, you see that?
Yes.
Is the external face of this building is to be overclad. The piece of cladding fixed to the external wall at the moment is on timber battens. And then you see actions to be taken. I would recommend, let's just look at this carefully. I would recommend that the contractor provides the scope of works covering how this cladding, ? How will the cladding be fixed to the building? And there's clearly a word missing in the first sentence there. That will have some significance in a moment. Paragraph 2, what fixings will be used? Paragraph 3, the fire rating of the cladding and the fixings. Paragraph 4, the building control officer's acceptance of this fixing system and the cladding used. Now, just keep that in mind. We may need to come back to that. But if we just go to your September 2019 statement, please, at page 12, I'd like to show you paragraph 57. You say in the third line, if any of the findings identified related to the refurbishment works, Janice Ray would send Carl's report to me to forward to Ryden to complete. I would then liaise with Ryden for them to take forward. However, my understanding is that Carl Stokes would also attend the Grenfell Tower to carry out fire safety inspections directly with Ryden. So that's what you say there. Can we next go to TMO 10012526, please? This is a version of the Record of Significant Findings and Action Plan accompanying the 17th of October 2014 FRA. But now we can see the column by whom has been filled in by the TMO. And just looking at the first one, because it's in front of us, you can see there that it says in relation to identified risk or hazard, work is presently being undertaken to convert some areas on the lower 3 floor levels of this building into domestic dwellings along with other work. And the overcladding of the whole building, proposals have been submitted to the local authority building control department under the building regulations process. Actions to be taken. And then in blue, building control application on file approvals not due until all items resolved. And then the by whom column is now filled in, Claire Williams, with a date to be completed by July 2015, just in relation to that item. Who was it who put into this document the words that we see in blue under actions to be taken?
I'm not sure whether it was myself or Janice Ray.
And who filled in the words by whom, indicating that you were the person to take those indicated out?
I would believe Janice would put my name against items.
I see. Did she do that before or after she had discussed it with you?
Both. I think usually she would put it in and say, is that right?
Okay.
So I suspect she would lead and put it in and then leave it to me to correct it.
Right. Were there email correspondences or communications between you on this subject, or did you do this face-to-face or on the telephone?
She would probably send it to me and she would then if I hadn't responded to her in a timely way, or we worked in the same building but just in different parts of the building, so I would sit with her and go through each point.
I see. Now, can we go to page 10 and look at the bottom of that page and over to the top of page 11? At the bottom of page 10, we can see under high priority, identified risk or hazard, the same as we saw before. The external face of this building is to be overclad, etc. You see that?
Yes.
And then under actions to be taken, I would recommend that the contractor provides the scope of the works covering how this, and we'll go to that in a moment. And then the by whom column, you just see it there, is, we go back, thank you. The by whom column is Claire Williams question mark. You see that?
Yes.
And then in green, if you go over to page 11, timber battens purely for mock-up. Cladding has horizontal cavity barrier to 3030, awaiting building regs approval. First, do you know why there was a question mark next to your name?
No, I don't know if it was because we were assuming Ryden would do it, but it would still be my name against it for the action.
Why would there be a doubt about whether it was your name?
I don't know.
Right. I mean, the question is, was there anybody else in the TMO who could stand in on this issue for you?
No.
Right.
No.
Did the action eventually become yours to resolve?
Yes, I believe it had my name against it.
Right. Now, we heard evidence from Simon O'Connor that the FRA action followed Mr. Stokes's viewing visit for the mock-up, and the mock-up was indeed on timber battens. His evidence was that Mr. Stokes had agreed that the timber was the obvious presenting issue, as he put it. That's day 26, page 133, lines 16 to 21, just for our record. Did you understand that this reference was to a reference to the mock-up?
The comment on the left is about the mock-up, yes.
Yes, I see. The comment on the left is to the mock-up.
Yes.
And the comment in relation to the timber battens, similarly, a reference to the mock-up, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Can we then go to TMO 00858290? This is an email some months later from you to Simon O'Connor at Ryden. And it's dated the 10th of April 2015, as you can see from the top of that page. And the subject is Grenfell FRA outstanding items. Simon, I've gone back through the list and need just a few more bits. And then at the bottom, at page 5, bottom of page 1, at paragraph 5, you say, I would recommend the contractor provides, 1, the scope of works will be covering how this cladding, and then there's something missing. How will the cladding be fixed to the building? 2, what fixings will be used? 3, the fire rating of the cladding and the fixings. 4, the building control officer's acceptance of this fixing system and the cladding used. Now, this is a direct cut and paste, isn't it, from the section of the 17th of October 2014 FRA we've just been looking at?
It is.
It is, and it even includes the grammatically incomplete paragraph 1, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Was this the first time that you asked Ryden to deal with this FRA action point?
I think it looks like the second time, because I've said I need a few more bits. I think he'd already given me a partial response, and this was me chasing.
Why do you say that?
Because this particular one had a lot of points on, and I remember it taking a little while to resolve. Normally I'd expect it to be back within the week, but I think this one had a little bit more information required, and so I believe I got partial information, and I went back to Ryden to get the outstanding information.
I understand that looking at it generically, Ms. Williams, but just on item 5, is this the first time that you are asking Ryden to answer the questions that the FRA had asked you, and it was your action item, back in October of the previous year?
No, I believe it was a chase-up, and I think it could be that he was saying, oh, we've got all the drawings, but I've said, no, we still need to see something. Can you give me the specific responses to these items?
There's no indication under paragraph 5 that you'd asked for any of these matters, or you'd asked any of these questions before. It's a simple cut and paste from the FRA, as you've rightly confirmed.
Yeah.
That rather suggests, doesn't it, that this was the first time that you had asked him for these details?
I think that, I'm using the phraseology in the first sentence, which says, I need a couple more bits, i.e. you've given me something, but not enough.
But it doesn't say a couple, it says a few more bits.
Few more bits.
And there are 5 more bits. But the bit we're looking at is a complete bit, isn't it? It's a cut and paste of the whole of what the FRA had contained on the 17th of October.
Yeah, I suspect, I know you don't like that sort of word, but I would have given Simon a hard copy and he possibly would have responded to some of it, but not the rest. So I'm asking him to finalise the information as requested.
Well, when did you give Simon O'Connor, do you recall, a hard copy?
That would be in my emails if it's...
It isn't.
I don't know, but I would have given him a hard copy. Bear in mind, I was on site most weeks. He would have said, I might have emailed it to him previously or to Simon Lawrence, but this wouldn't be the first time he'd seen it, which is why I'm chasing.
What had prompted you to send him this request some 7 months after the FRA?
I would have sent it to him pretty much straight away. There's no reason for me to hang on to it. I have a busy workload. The quicker I can get things off my desk, the better. This would be something with a priority, so I would have sent it to him earlier. So my view is still that he'd give me a partial response and I'm chasing for the outstanding items.
Well, you say you would have sent him to him. He would have sent it to him pretty much straight away. We have no email record that you did that, at least not in the documents disclosed. And there's no indication in this email that you had asked these questions before and were now chasing him up. Now, given those two facts, my question again, why were you only doing this now?
I understand what you're saying, but I wouldn't have sat on this. One, Janice Ray was incredibly organised and would have been on my case. Secondly, I would have done it anyway in order to move my workload. There's no virtue to me of having this hanging over my head. I would want to get this sorted as soon as possible. Right.
Well, in the light of that answer, let's look at a document. RYD 3043476, please. And bearing in mind the date of the email we've just been looking at is the 10th of April 2015, here is now an email from you on the 10th of June 2015, exactly 2 months later, to Simon O'Connor. Subject, urgent, Grenfell FRA outstanding items. And you say to him, Simon, I think you could polish this off quickly, don't you? See you at 9:30 tomorrow. And below that email, you can see that you have sent him again the email that you sent him on the 10th of April, the 2 months previously.
Yes.
And you've added the subject header, urgent. Do we take it from this that you had to ask him again for these items, including item 5 that we looked at earlier, because during the 2 months up to the 10th of June 2015, he hadn't responded?
Yes, I believe I had spoken to him about it many times, and he'd said he was following it up, I'd get it, but I didn't get it, and so I thought I need to put this in writing because this is any FRA is obviously a priority, and I just wasn't getting a response from him. So having spoken to him many times, it went in writing.
Oh, I see. So you're saying that the email string here doesn't reflect the fact that between the second email on the page and the first email on the page, you'd had lots of discussions with him asking for the document. Is that right?
That's right.
Is that your evidence?
It is.
Why is there nothing in your witness statement about that?
My witness statement covers areas that I was aware of that I thought would be of importance to the inquiry. Obviously, it was a long project, and there are areas that would have been of less interest, perhaps, in my view, of our lawyer's view.
Well, I don't really understand that.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
Well, it was a long project. 3 years, I was masses of paperwork, so I'm not going to remember every single item, and I wouldn't have prioritised this.
No, I just wonder why this particular issue, a request from your fire risk assessor that the contractor provides details about the cladding, and your reaction to it by chasing up Ryden wasn't something sufficiently important for you to cover in your witness statement, Ms. Williams. Can you explain that?
I reiterate, it was a long project. There were lots of emails over many topics. My statement covered areas that myself and the lawyers thought would be pertinent.
Was the question from the FRA, what is the fire rating of the cladding and the fixings, not pertinent, given that your witness statements are produced after the fire and are dealing with an inquiry into the fire at Grenfell Tower?
Yes, I, as you say, I understand what you're asking, but at the time, in the scheme of things, it wasn't brought to my attention as something that I should be prioritising, and I probably may not have remembered these emails anyway.
Right. But you would have us believe that you had lots of discussions with him about it?
I was on site most weeks, and I would be pursuing it actively because this was something I was aware of.
Can I just ask, do you actually have any concrete recollection of discussing this with Mr. O'Connor, or are you just telling us you think you probably would have done it?
No, I know in this instance I did. He was under a lot of pressure at the time, and I think he left fairly shortly afterwards. But no, I do remember talking to someone about this specifically. Right. It's not speculation.
Thank you very much.
Well, then, you'll have to explain to the chairman how it came about, or comes about, that if you look back at the first email on this page, there's no reference at all there to any discussion between you and Simon O'Connor between the 10th of April 2015, when you posed the question to him, and you're giving him an urgent reminder. Why is that?
The fact that there's no emails doesn't mean that we didn't have verbal conversations, and we did.
Yes, and I understand that, but I'm asking you really about the tone and content of your chasing email. Simon, I think you could polish this off quickly, don't you? There's no reference to the fact that you've been nagging him for weeks about it.
I believe that at that point the project was under a lot of pressure. Simon was under a lot of pressure. I was perhaps giving him more leeway than he should have had. And that is a very gentle reminder to say, I need this now. That's why the heading says urgent, 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 because I've been waiting for this for many months.
Indeed you had. And I'm going to suggest to you that this is in fact the first time you chased this up, which is consistent and only consistent with the content and tone of this email.
That's not true. I did chase it with him. I remember talking to him about it because, say, I was being chased internally. It was a fire risk assessment. I would want the responses as soon as possible. And Simon was the stumbling block. He wasn't getting back the responses as quickly as he should.
Now, Mr. O'Connor was asked about this email, and his evidence was that he would have forwarded this on to someone such as Neil Crawford. Note the would have in my question to you. That's day 26, page 88, lines 11 to 13. Do you know whether he ever, in fact, ever did forward this message to him onto somebody else, such as Neil Crawford?
I don't know, but I am aware that he might have mentioned he was passing it on to somebody, particularly in relation to the critical points about the cladding. I think he would have passed that on, but I don't know who he passed it on to.
We have been unable to find any record of a response from Ryden in answer to your question. Did you receive any response?
I don't remember, but I would hope that we might have sat down together to because he just wasn't getting the paperwork together. I don't know. Sorry, I shouldn't speculate. I don't know.
Well, Given what you now tell us was the absolute importance of getting this information, in respect of which you chased him, you say, many times between April and June 2015, we see no record of any response. Can you explain that?
No, but I thought the email to Janice... No, I don't know, sorry.
Because it looks, you see, from the documents, although you asked him the question, he never responded. Given the importance of the information that you say you were after, I just want to know why that is.
I suspect we would have sat down and we would have just gone through it, because I was getting nowhere in terms of getting information from him.
Now, the questions that you were asking him, to which you say you suspect you sat down and got answers to, fall into 4 categories. There are 4 questions. They're very clear questions. Did you make any record of the answers that Simon O'Connor eventually gave you, you say?
Only those that would be recorded on the FRA.
What did you tell him was the fire rating of the cladding and the fixings?
I wouldn't have known, so I haven't seen the ultimate FRA, but that would presumably have been a resume of our discussion.
So we've got to look to the next FRA, is that right?
That's why I'm expecting that there would be the feedback, yes.
Right. It looks from the documents that despite your asking this question, you never received a response and didn't follow it up to close it off, so that you had a clear document trail and a response in writing from Simon O'Connor. Is that right?
If you're saying there are no documents, there are no documents, but say I believe we did close it off, and we would have done that by sitting down together and me just using his information, because clearly he was under pressure and not getting anything back at this stage.
Well, when you sat down together, and I'm afraid this isn't in your statement, so I'm just asking you blind, as it were, but would you have written down what he was telling you in answer to each of these questions?
I would have probably written it on the form, yes.
On the form? What form?
The FRA form.
Right. Mr. Chairman, it's 3 minutes to 1.
Yes.
And uncharacteristically, I'm going to ask you to rise a little early, because I've come to the end of that topic. One or two things I may need to go over the lunch break, to maybe to revisit that topic. But it would be a convenient moment.
Well, then we'll stop at that point.
Very good.
Yes, thank you. Well, Ms. Williams, we're going to stop now so we can all get some lunch. We'll resume at 2 o'clock, please. And as usual, in the meantime, please don't talk to anyone else about your evidence or anything relating to it. All right?
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. 2 o'clock, please.